Sup, Craig, ya bitch.
Hello, welcome to today's episode of Juicing the Numbers, the last edition of the Movies Edition. I'm your host, Joshua Tracy.
And I'm Corwin Heller.
And as I said, this is the last time we're doing this on this podcast. We are switching podcasts. There'll be a new podcast from Juicing the Numbers. We're going to call it Juicing the Big Screen, where it'll release on Tuesdays. Where Corwin and I will continue our weekly movie discussions. So at the end of the episode, we're going to give another movie recommendation or movie to review, as we've been doing for the past, 4 or 5 months. But it will not be recorded on this podcast. It will be recorded on a new podcast called, once again, Juicing the Big Screen, that will be available everywhere.
Everywhere where movie podcasts are sold.
Which, in theory, is actually everywhere.
Yeah.
And we will be selling it. It will cost $100 an episode.
$100 a minute. Let's be greedy here, Josh, because we know our listeners will pay it.
You know what's funny is if
Our
we
biggest
did
listener,
that...
Jeff Bezos.
I was going to say, if we did that and released an episode every single day, we still wouldn't have as much money as Jeff Bezos. It would take well beyond our lifetime. Anyway, that sad fact behind us. Let's talk about some movies. This week, Corwin and I have watched the 1967 film The Graduate and the 2020 film An American Pickle. Corwin, where do you want to start today?
I want to start with The Graduate.
I was kind of hoping you'd say that, and I have it up first in my browser. All right. 1967's The Graduate, written by Calder Willingham, Buck Henry, and who's the third guy? Charles Webb. That's who wrote the novel. So the screenplay was written by Calder Willingham and Buck Henry, which sounds like if a Texas movie met with a British high society film, what the main characters would be named. It was directed by Mike Nichols. It stars Dustin Hoffman, Anne Bancroft, and Catherine Ross, amongst others, as we always say. It had an estimated budget of $3 million. It had a cumulative worldwide gross of $105 million. Some might call that a success. Who's to say? That ROI sure is a fickle thing. Its tagline is, "What'll you do after you graduate?" Which I think is a very fitting tagline for once.
I actually like that one. I will say, that's not even in the middle. I like that one.
Even if the bar was set significantly higher than it currently is, I still think that's good.
Mm-hmm. We should write these down and try and rank these at some point, because that does seem like a lot of work at this point. No, it really wouldn't. It's like Googling 20 things, but that might be fun.
Yeah, well, Google is a lot. I don't need them to know what I've been watching. I've already Googled so many. I Google all these movies. That's how I have the web pages in front of me. I don't know who I am without Google. This film won one Oscar on the back of 7 nominations. It won for Best Director for Mike Nichols. It was nominated for Best Picture for Lawrence Terman, Best Actor in a Leading Role for Dustin Hoffman, Best Actress in a Leading Role for Anne Bancroft, Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Catherine Ross, Best Writing for the duo of hilariously juxtaposed names I read earlier, and Best Cinematography for Robert Surtees. Corwin, what did you think? Oh, sorry, and the overarching plot is a disillusioned college graduate finds himself torn between his older lover and her daughter. Corwin, what do you think of this movie?
I have one word for you, Josh. Plastics.
I think about that line all the time.
I tried watching this film probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, early on in my adult life as a 14-year-old. And I don't think I could get through the first scene where it's like, "Oh, Mrs. Robinson, are you trying to seduce me?" I was just like, wow, this is a whole lot of boring nothing, and I just don't care for it. Watching it now, oh, I adore this movie. This just it just has that genuine, honest feel to it, where Dustin Hoffman's character is so easy to connect to and just feed off of, and just I feel like I'm a part of this. I feel like I'm a part of his situation and his struggles, and I just love this movie through and through.
Can I interrupt you real quick with one of my favorite stories about this movie that surrounds how Dustin Hoffman got the role?
Josh, I interrupt you so often, it's only fair you interrupt with the story.
So Dustin Hoffman, who was an actor by this point, like he wasn't horribly unknown, but still relatively, I guess, fresh in the game, shows up to his audition, and the director like had auditioned a few other people from what I'm supposed to what I am to understand, and was looking for a shy, meek guy. Dustin Hoffman shows up to audition, and the director mistook him for the window washer, and so he told Dustin Hoffman, "Go wash those windows," and Dustin Hoffman was like too shy to be like, "But sir, I am here to act," and instead started washing the fucking windows. And when and then left. Then he didn't even audition. And then later on, the director found out that that kid who washed the fucking windows was actually here to like be an actor, and ended up bringing him back in for an audition and ultimately casting him for the role for mainly for that reason.
That's fucking hilarious.
Right?
Because like, I'm gonna look back and see what other movies he was in prior to this, but like, I feel like he had some acting gigs before this. I was
Oh no,
wrong.
he did.
He had nothing spectacular.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's not like he was like. It's not like you're bringing like modern day Leonardo DiCaprio into this, but he like, he'd been in things.
Mhm.
Nothing that mattered, but things. Anyway, that was my
Well, while
interruption.
you were saying that, I was kinda looking through the, Academy Awards from that year just to see what else came out, and boy, what a bunch of classics. In the Heat of the Night, which won Best Picture, Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, Cool Hand Luke, we
Love that
have The
movie.
Dirty Dozen. This is a great year for movies.
Oh yeah, no, dude, the '60s was a huge, huge change in like how filmmaking was done, the type of stories that were being told, and the manner in which they were telling them. And I think The Graduate's a great encapsulation of that,
Mhm.
in small part because of the subject matter. But yeah, dude, the '60s can't. Oh, what a transition for Hollywood.
Yeah, I believe it. I always think of Bonnie and Clyde from I think an old video that I watched about how Bonnie and Clyde was like the first film, widely broadcast film to use like the modern editing techniques that we, see in everyday movies today. But knowing it came out, the same year as The Graduate, which looking back and watching is extremely similar editing wise, is wild. I love the way this movie was edited.
I always thought that's one of my weak points, noticing editing, which is why I always like when you bring it up because it's going to force me to think about how films are edited as I go forward.
Mm.
Can you tell me some of the things you enjoyed about the editing of this film?
Um, So they play a lot with like focus and moving
Yes.
camera movement. Bringing it into a shot to focus around different subjects, pulling it away and at a different angle to change perspective. And they were really close to having another split diopter shot, which, as you can tell by now, is like my favorite thing to bring up whenever I see it, just because it's a really cool name and a really cool shot. And when you put those two things together, it means I'm going to talk about it ad nauseum. But it didn't quite hold it long enough to actually be one. But yeah, like it's little things. Like in all reality, you're not supposed to notice editing, but being able to see like shot selection, um, you know, putting all of these scenes together, like when you first have that scene where Mrs. Robinson is undressing herself and comes into the room naked in front of Dustin Hoffman's character. It's those fast cuts between, showing her tan lines at her waist, cutting back to his nervous face and his eyes jumping around, just back and forth, quick cuts, just shooting up the tension that you feel. Oh man, it was a lot of fun to watch and just kind of break down, really seeing it for the first time.
You know what's funny that I'm just reading about this film. Sorry, total deviation.
That's what
But
this podcast is.
I mean, basically, it is nothing but a series of non sequiturs. Dustin Hoffman was actually supposed to had apparently all but agreed to a role in Mel Brooks's The Producers that he turned down to be in this.
Hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
I'm glad he did because I much prefer this, especially
Well,
him in it. He
that is
plays
a
such a
fucking
perfect
hot
character.
take that I will not stand for because The Producers is art. Don't you dare. I will not hear Mel Brooks slander on this podcast. But could you imagine going from working with Mel Brooks every day to working with Mel Brooks's wife every day? What a hilarious transition that would be.
I just searched The Producers on IMDb, and the first one that came up was the 2005 remake with Matthew Broderick.
Oh,
And
yeah,
I
fuck
just
that hot
refuse
garbage.
to even select that and figure out what that is.
Oh, I've seen it. It is not good.
I can't imagine.
So
What are your
let's
thoughts?
I love this movie. This is one of my favorite movies. I would even maybe be so bold as to say. Um, I liked it when I was younger because it felt older. You know, there's a
Mm.
lot of adult themes here, and I love it more now because holy shit, do I get it? It's bizarre having to navigate the sudden growth and change that is graduating college. It's a huge shift. And it's tough having like a relative listlessness about it because, like, yeah, he got a degree. And now what? Like, my degree is
Mhm.
in economics. Like, what the fuck do you do with that? And don't get me wrong, I loved my economics degree. I had a great time doing it in college, and I feel good when I have the opportunity to talk about it and speak about those subjects. But like, I'm not going to go to the economics factory to go bust out, like little economic widgets every day. Like, there's nothing to do with that, and that's why like he gets pushed into, not pushed into, but constant attempts at persuading him to do plastics because I mean, fuck, man, if it was the '60s, like that's just like what you did. Like everyone fucking worked in plastics. At least it seems from watching these types of films, and like.
Right.
Is it what he wants to do? Clearly not. Otherwise, he'd be chomping at the bit to do it. But like, he has to kind of play around with the idea because fuck, what else are you going to do? And it's the same thing when it comes to relationships. He just doesn't know what the fuck to do. And he does what other people tell him to do because he has no direction because he seems like a guy who never really got the chance to have his own opinion on that matter. And it ultimately ends up leading to, well, the entirety of this film. Which I think is gorgeously made. I love what Mike Nichols has done with this. The shiftings of in and out of focus is one of my favorite parts about watching this. Is just finding them all. The score by Simon and Garfunkel is not only brutally '60s, but also just absolutely phenomenal. This is where the song "Mrs. Robinson" by Simon and Garfunkel comes from.
I
Funny
won't
story
start
about
singing
that.
but yeah, go
Real
ahead.
quick, funny story about that. Do you know what the original title of the song Mrs. Robinson was supposed to be?
The Sounds of Silence.
No, it was supposed to be. It was originally Mrs.
Land.
Roosevelt, and the song was supposed to be about um, what the fuck was Franklin Roosevelt's wife's name?
Eleanor.
Eleanor. I wanted to say it was Eleanor, but I couldn't remember if I was misremembering Franklin's middle name of Delano as Eleanor. Anyway, so Simon and Garfunkel bring that song to Mike Nichols, and they were like, "Hey, like we know like it doesn't like really fit name wise, but we really like the song." And Mike Nichols looked at them and said, "We're not making a movie about Eleanor fucking Roosevelt. Name the song Mrs. Robinson," which is hilarious.
And then Simon and Garfunkel started washing the windows.
Yeah, everyone just kept watching. If you watched the windows for Mike Nichols, you got hired. Not a euphemism.
So he got married,
Mike Nichols, dirty windows. Yeah. His wife to this day still washes the windows and thinks of him. It's the only movie I've ever seen Catherine Ross in, and you know what? That's fine. She did a great job.
Is Guest in the Sundance Kid?
Oh my god, she is in that.
Dude, that's my favorite Western.
Oh my gosh, she is in that. I forgot. Okay,
Josh,
those are the two movies I know her from.
That's the only two movies I know her from, but you know,
yeah,
it's a big
this
one.
is And it's also funny, speaking of two movies, because for Anne Bancroft, this is one of the only two movies I really think of her from. I think of her as the hot older woman, the sex positive, sexually aggressive older woman in The Graduate, and then I think of her as the buttoned up nun in that in The Miracle Worker, which is a completely different role and really just shows how much range Anne Bancroft has as an actress, and I think it's well on display in this film. And Dustin Hoffman, as you said earlier, is fucking perfect in this. My God, he was built to play this role, and the fact that he wasn't typecast as this guy forever speaks volumes to who he is as an actor.
Oh yeah, his versatility is unreal.
I know, my God, he's so good.
One of my questions actually was when you see Dustin Hoffman, what is the film you think of, and like what is your favorite Dustin Hoffman film?
Okay,
Not
so
like film overall, but like him in the film. Like, what's your favorite role, I should say?
all right, well, first I have to bring up the movie I think of him, think first of him from. I don't know how best to say those words or the correct order. But the movie I first think of him from, and I'm so sorry this is my answer, is Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Because of that stupid like accent he does, I've never been able to get this image and sound of Dustin Hoffman doing like a weird like high pitched lisp thing while like all the weird magic shit's happening in the background out of my head. And I wasn't even like a kid when this movie came out. Like I was like 13, 14 when that movie came out and thought it was stupid as shit. But like every time I picture Dustin Hoffman in my mind's eye, that's what comes up.
That is a movie I never saw and completely struck from my memory, like of its existence.
You
Wow,
do
just
not need to
looking at
watch
it
it.
on IMDb, that is, yeah, I'm not ever gonna watch that.
Corwin, you shouldn't watch it. Your life would
No.
objectively be worse if you watched it. But my favorite Dustin Hoffman film is probably Midnight Cowboy.
That's fair. That's fair.
How about you?
The reason I wanted to ask this so specifically was when I think of Dustin Hoffman, it's Meet the Fockers, and I thought I was gonna get
Ah,
some flack for that.
that's a great answer,
Obviously,
actually.
now, not even close to Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium.
Well,
But
it's
like
true. I
that's
mean, like, think about like when you think of actors, like I don't. When I think of like Daniel Day Lewis, I don't think of him even like in the Abe Lincoln role because it's so understated. I think of him as from My Left Foot, which, or even from what's it called, Nine, where he plays the Italian filmmaker Guido. Like I think whenever you think of an actor, like I don't think it's unusual for you to deviate to like their biggest and wackiest character. You know, Dustin Hoffman's big and wacky in Meet the Fockers. He's bigger and wackier in Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Like, I think that's a normal place for both of our minds to go.
I just feel like that's a movie I watched so much as a kid. Like my family just loved that like trilogy of movies. Or I know there was a third one. I don't remember what it is.
It's Meet the Fockers and then Meet the Parents and then
No,
no,
it's
it's
Meet
Meet
the
the Parents.
Parents,
Then
then
it's
Meet
Meet
the
the
Fockers.
Fockers. And then I want to say it's just like Meet the Fockers 2 or some stupid shit.
Meet the hold on, IMDb, don't fail me. Meet the Robinsons, which is a different movie. Man, it doesn't have it. Maybe it is only two. I don't know. It
Little
doesn't matter.
Fockers. It's called Little Fockers.
Oh, that makes sense. I also have struck that from my memory. So
I'm not sure I ever got that far down in the Meet the Parents / Fockers canon.
yeah, it's whatever.
That's a
Um,
27 Metascore. Oh my god, that's bad.
but I will say I enjoy those movies a lot. Great guilty pleasure movies. But my favorite role is him in as a producer in Wag the Dog with Robert De
Oh,
Niro, Woody Harrelson.
yeah, it's a great movie.
Disturbingly accurate in the world. especially today. But yeah, still a good movie.
Yeah, it's so funny looking at like politics movies from before 4 years ago and saying to yourself, that's so stupid. Like it would never get that bad. And then, or like people can't be that dumb behind the scenes. And then you get to like today. Um,
And
like
you just can't
real,
believe how they had to tone down all these movies to get us to believe them. Like, come
real
on.
quick, I just want to read Dustin Hoffman's Academy Award nominations. And I know we're like jerking off Dustin Hoffman super hard right now and not talking about the movie, but like, yeah, he does deserve it. Here are his films that he's been nominated for Best Actor for, going from oldest to newest: The Graduate, Midnight Cowboy, Lenny, Kramer versus Kramer, Tootsie, Rain Man, and Wag the Dog. Those are 7 vastly different roles. Like, vastly different roles. No two characters are remotely the same in any of these movies.
Yeah, and I fucking love Dustin Hoffman for it.
Like this is I like seeing it laid out like that is genuinely so impressive.
Have you ever seen the Meyerowitz stories? Meyerowitz, excuse me.
Um no, I have not.
He's pretty good in that. I really like his character in that.
All right, we should stop jerking him off now and talk about the movie again.
What
Uh,
movie?
um from what I can tell, Meet the Fockers.
Ah, yes, yes, love the baby.
So this is a time of upheaval. Like, all right, let me start at a different point. Um, have you watched this movie in completion before you graduated college, or has it only been recent for you?
If you listen to what I said earlier in the podcast, I've only ever seen the first like
All right, that's what
8
I thought.
minutes,
I just
but
wanted to make
you know,
sure. How
yeah.
you are the more recent college grad of the two of us. How does this hit you, having watched it through that scope right now?
Well, up until the point where he starts fucking his like closest family friends' mom, um, pretty damn accurate. Just that feeling of like stuck in this purgatory with no idea of what direction you're going to head in, no direction of what you want to do, no direction of where you're going to go, just basically waiting for something to happen, and the just depression that it, forms with it, just being lost. Um, can definitely connect closely to that. Again, starting an affair with close family friends and then marrying their daughter, little out of my wheelhouse, I will
Well,
say.
let's talk about the mom fucking. So he I guess gets propositioned is probably the best term for it. By Mrs. Robinson, a close family friend of his parents, and ends up at first begrudgingly, not even begrudgingly. He goes over because he keeps asking her to do tasks, and he is too meek of a person to be like, "No, you're trying to fuck me, and I do not want to be fucked." Um, and then eventually she just like presents herself to him, and he's like, "Well, I guess I do want to be fucked," and then fucks her. And at that point, he starts rather clumsily and meekly, as is his character, having an affair with her that really began in kind of a weird light because it's like, all right, how much of this is Dustin Hoffman wanting this, and how much of it is him just not having a good grasp at the fact that he's an adult and can like and has wants and feelings and can rightfully express them and understand what he wants versus what someone's telling him he wants. Like he probably would have joined the plastics industry because that guy told him he should, because that's who he is. And then here he is also having a relationship with someone that at the outset he very much so made clear the fact he does not want, um, and ends up doing it anyway because I guess the because is what I'm getting at here. What do you think about the whole relationship at its core?
I think there is a significant amount of emotional manipulation occurring on, the part of or by Mrs. Robinson, basically seeing this, young man who is clearly lost and I guess scared would be a good word, who just is looking for anything to grasp onto and is very clearly just manipulating him and twisting him as, an authority figure in his life. Because when you're that age, adults are, authority figures all around you, family, friends, adults are people that have, a position of respect within your family, and they do have a position of authority. And despite the fact that you are now a college graduate, essentially 21 years old, a full-fledged adult in many, many respects, you don't see yourself as that. And so when an adult, what's the right term for this, kind of preys upon you the way she did, it's very easy to fall victim to that. And it was, very, very heavy-handed in this. Just with all the shit she pulls and just the lying, the manipulation, the twisting of everything.
Yeah, and it's a thing that like when as you start going through it, in large part because of the gender dynamic, this would be significantly creepier if the gender roles were reversed. But like when he eventually goes on that date with Mrs. Robinson's daughter Claire, it gives him maybe not on the date itself, maybe a little bit in the wake of the date, realizing he has options and like gets to make choices and can pick what he wants. He kind of comes to terms with the fact that maybe Mrs. Robinson isn't what he wants, and maybe he wants Claire, and that he actually has the agency to like make that decision, something that he didn't really realize he had before. And that really puts into perspective the first part of the movie, where he is engaged in what isn't just an affair, because affairs in of themselves are what it is. What logistically speaking is just a terrible position for him to be in. This is someone he knows. It's someone he knows the daughter of. It's someone his parents know. Close friend he'd see at gatherings all the time. Like it's messy. And to eventually have the film come to a point where he doesn't even want to be in it, and he also didn't want to be in it in the first place, it makes the beginning look pretty different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so weird with, how this movie presents itself about, what is this? By everything I've seen going into this is a drama. For significant portions of this is a drama. And it's just undercut with these, moments of comedic relief where is like you think like is this a comedy? Like is this just a heavy-handed comedy? Because some of these scenes are just intentionally or not just so naturally hilarious. And Dustin Hoffman is so great at having that his reactions, the way he plays off situations, like he's so naturally funny that like it had me dying at some spots. And if you just change the editing and the style of this ever so slightly, this could be a roaring comedy.
Oh, very quickly. Yeah, no, very, very quickly. It's a stone's throw from being a comedy anyway. Because like you said, so many of the comedic scenes that are scattered throughout this. One of my favorites being the gas station scene near the end, where he's just like berating that old man into giving him directions. Lying about being a pastor. God, it's so fucking funny. Mrs. Robinson's character, I think, is painted in a relatively negative light, especially in light of all the things we just said. But I also can't help but find her to be just such a sympathetic character. I mean, here she is in what is clearly a loveless marriage. Daughter's out of the house. That's the only kid she seems to have. Empty nest. This is the 60s, so she's probably just a housewife. They weren't allowed to have jobs back then. They're not even people. They've had the vote for under 50 years at this point. And clearly she's not getting any of the physical intimacy that she would really like to be getting. and she finds what could be a suitable arrangement in her eyes, not having to divorce her husband and getting to have sex with a younger person in this man. And her only real demand was, don't go out with my daughter. And then the going out with the daughter gets kind of foisted upon Dustin Hoffman's character, and she feels this great sense of betrayal and really starts to distance and in all likelihood probably push the relationship between Claire and the man to whom she almost ends up betrothed. And it really is kind of it's granted, I understand, especially since I just kind of laid it out, the really problematic ways with how she entered this relationship with Dustin Hoffman. It coming from a point of like sexual frustration and romantic frustration and just great dissatisfaction with the relationship that she has. It's understandable how she might be relatively aggressive. Granted, not doesn't make it right, but it might make it. It's understandable how those types of pent up frustrations could manifest themselves in what is a relatively more aggressive way, and then to have everything be pushed back upon you in such a deep and personal way. Him entering into even just a few dates of a relationship with her daughter is just so much. I'm sure it wouldn't be anything if they weren't fucking, but to see not just your relationship with this person end, not just that relationship with your daughter, but also have to understand that she's going to be falling back into a way of life that she has, I would assume, hated for what I would also assume is a long time.
Yes.
It's a pretty tragic story on her end as well.
I agree with you up until she plays it off as a rape. And that's the point where immediately it was, oh my God, this went from sympathy for losing someone you were connecting with to you are an absolute monster and I hope nothing but the worst upon you.
It's crazy. I constantly forget that happens in the film. And every single time I watch it, I'm like, oh shit, that's right.
Yeah, God, like that is just like, I have such strong feelings towards that because of, not that I have had anything close to a personal, connection or, I have never even been close to that kind of situation. But the idea that, a person can make up a lie that can so easily destroy someone's entire life, career, hopes, and dreams, and have all but almost no evidence, almost just them saying it can be believed, is just so horrific in my mind that, that is never something joked about. It's never something that should be played off. It's never something that should be taken lightly in any capacity. That's not me saying, women who come out in those situations and make those statements shouldn't be believed. They absolutely should. It just makes it that much more impactful when someone lies about it because you have to believe them. And it's just, oh God, that situation is just, in all honesty, like I joke with people like, oh, I've been a swimmer my whole life and drowning is my biggest fear. Having that situation occur to me is so far and away the biggest fear in my life. It's unimaginable because that is it. Like that is the end of your life.
Which makes the response to it in this film all the more bizarre because it's also like one of the reasons I keep forgetting about it is because it's like a blip on the radar of this film. I think it's his dad that brings it up, right? He's like, Mrs. Robinson saying you raped her. Is that true? Not like the police are here, right?
I thought it was Elaine that brought it up when she like comes to his apartment.
Oh, you're right. Still, the fact that it's like
it's even worse.
It's kind of just like brought up. I kept saying Claire. It is Elaine. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, the fact that it's like brought up by like another character as like almost kind of in passing, more so than it is by the police. Well, Dustin Hoffman's in handcuffs is also just fucking Oh, so sad. So
Mhm.
sad. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just yeah, like that whole situation where it's like, "You raped my mom." "No, your mother came to me naked in your room and seduced me." And then, like, 2 minutes go by, and it's like, "Alright, Ben, get over here. Give me a kiss." It's just like, "Oh, man," like, I get, like, if you believe him, I get why you would believe your mom telling you that, but, like,
Oh,
oh my
Dustin
god, like
Hoffman
that.
Dustin Hoffman's optics of this are so bad. It's like, "No, no, I didn't rape her. I drove her home because she was too drunk to drive herself, and then she was all of a sudden naked in front of me and coming on to me, and I couldn't say no. She was blocking the door." It's like, "Oh my god, dude, what the fuck?" And, yeah, he so should have been testifying that from jail, but again, not where this movie went. It was 1967, and women were barely people. Um,
Exactly.
what do you think of the Elaine character in this film? She's pretty not in the movie a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I it's hard because this movie basically does a 180 once they go on that date where it goes from, "Oh, okay, this is about, Dustin Hoffman and Mrs. Robinson." Elaine is mentioned in passing to this movie is about Dustin Hoffman and Elaine with Mrs. Robinson being brought up in passing. And it's just a complete 180. And I don't dislike it. I do enjoy the change and almost the twist of it, because he's going from a very ugly relationship in quotes to one that he cares so strongly for. And despite the situation, like it's clear they both have strong positive feelings towards each other, and by all means it is and would be a healthy relationship. It's just, man, that's a weird change. And just like thinking back on it again, this was the first time I've ever seen it. I just don't think I could ever get over the foundation that this is based on of you fucked my mom while she was married to my dad, was forced into a date with me. By all means, that date where he brings her to a strip club, and is absolutely the rudest, worst date imaginable. Um, and then like, oh shit, no, I want to marry you, babe. I fucking love you to death. Like that situation altogether is just like, I would be so far out of it at that point. Like I would be fucking miles away, going 90 down the freeway, just avoiding this, getting as far away from this as possible. But man, it makes for a great movie.
Oh yeah, the Elaine character is, and I'm going to be controversial, poorly written. Really poorly written. She is
Yeah,
there to
yeah.
give Dustin Hoffman an excuse to not fuck Mrs. Robinson anymore. Um, that's it. Because if Elaine didn't come along, Dustin Hoffman would have spent his entire life, not actual Dustin Hoffman, Ben Braddock, fucking Mrs. Robinson during the week and then chilling in his pool on the weekends. Um, he'd be one of those like divorced husbands sitting in like a really shitty LA motel, but without the divorce. That's who he would be. Um, so Elaine really, because you're right, it's a bizarre plot line that she's given. It's hey, you are going to be passed off onto this dude, because we told you to. He's going to take you for ice cream and a strip joint, and you're going to hate it. But then when he tracks you down later on in the film, you're going to decide that you actually do like him. But too late, we passed you off on a different young buck. And instead, he's just going to show up at your wedding and snatch you away onto a bus. And she is going to love it. And that is a wacky plot point because it's not about her. It's about providing plot to Dustin Hoffman's character.
Well,
Um,
I will add two things to that.
go ahead.
One, I think the acceptance is her seeing the true nature of Dustin Hoffman, through his, I guess I'll say, persistence. in, trying to win her back over. Like she can see that his actions and, following his honesty about the situation at hand, he was fully open with her, never once lied about any of this. It just happens to be the situation at hand was so fucking insane that, God, it's hard not to be upset about it. And he, is persistently showing like, hey, I care strongly and deeply about you. That part of my life is just so completely over. I'm here for you. I'm willing to commit to you. This is not at all about, me just trying to get a quick bang or whatever, this, that. It's like, hey, this is a true rooted, feeling that I have towards you. And I think that was, her acceptance after seeing all that. At the same time, the fact that she is just willing to marry two dudes after fucking at least what was portrayed as like a couple weeks, like 2 months, maybe, like absolute max, like insane.
Yeah, the
Just
the
how
the
like
passage of time is really tough to differentiate there.
right. So like he graduates, he starts with this relationship with Mrs. Robinson. That goes on for an indeterminate amount of time. Then he starts up this relationship with Elaine, which happens for a short but also indeterminate amount. They're broken up. She goes back to school at some point, and this seems to happen soon after. So like 2-3 months, maybe, I don't know, like the overall timeline for this, which like I know in overarching the storyline here, like she's known in air quotes these guys for years, or so they like infer. But God, like I feel like that marriage is just too big of a decision to happen in 2 months, let alone whatever time period this actually took place. Like, wow.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so we've been talking about this movie for a while, which I wasn't expecting to do, which I really should have because there's so much to get into with
Hmm.
this. And God damn it, I've been enjoying this. But I do want to make sure we don't have this podcast run for 2 hours.
Fair enough.
So what do you say we jump into the end and then wrap it up?
Sure. I mean, I have a few quick notes that I'll throw in after we talk about it, but I'll go quick.
All right, cool. This is one of the ending of this movie is one of the reasons I think of it as one of my favorite movies.
Hmm.
Um, so it is a hilariously large and wildly crazy and ridiculous ending. Um, Physically speaking, which you don't see in this film before it, because while the plot line is a little bit wild and wacky at some points, all the physical aspects of the film are pretty straight and narrow here. But Dustin Hoffman somehow manages to bring himself up to the weirdly located church that Elaine's wedding is to, whatever that blonde fucko's name is. Gets her attention from this very conveniently placed glass catwalk. She screams out his name, starts running back down the aisle towards the entrance to the church, where he meets her. He then the whole family starts pouring towards the exit, as one would expect,
Hmm.
which he then shuts the doors and seals it closed with a very large cross. Fucking hilarious.
Jinx.
And yeah, and then runs outside, and the two of them get on what looks like a yellow school bus, but because it is a yellow school bus, but I guess in the 1960s that was just a bus. Where the two of them get to the back of the bus, and they sit down in this oddly shaped middle seat that ran the entire length of the back of the bus, and they're laughing and they're sweating and they're looking at each other with love in their eyes, and it's quiet. They're not saying anything, and then the smiles slowly fade, and they're and they kind of pop back every now and then, but the faces are more serious, the tone is more somber, as the reality of what they just did and what their life is about to start looking like starts to dawn on them. And I love it. What do you think of this ending?
I really enjoy it. Just that realization. The consequences of their actions, like that reality is just washed over them. And I watched through it 2 or 3 times just to really be able to get a grasp on those emotions and see if I could, get a better handle of them. I will say I don't think I see any regret in anything there. I think it's really just they're both happy. They're both happy with the situation that they're in. I think it's just an oh shit, like this is real now. Like this is, the adrenaline is wearing off or per se. Reality's setting in, and I think they're just like, like this is real life. And I think that's part of it part of graduating, becoming an adult, the reality sets in where it's like, this is it. Like this is life from here on out. Yeah. How about you?
Oh, I think it's so perfect because it's again, I think I've said this many times about endings I've really been a fan of. The ending is a little microcosm for the whole movie. I will start with one note that seeing Mrs. Robinson in, I don't want to say the crowd because there aren't crowds at weddings, there are attendees at weddings. But seeing her face among the masses, having not seen her for so much of the film up to this point, because as Corwin was saying earlier, like after the Elaine storyline starts to really pick up, like the Mrs. Robinson storyline like almost entirely drops off. Which I think makes seeing her at the wedding that much more impactful. I think it's actually a really interesting and I think great choice that they don't give you much Mrs. Robinson, because seeing like the way she looks at what is currently happening in front of her eyes is wild, especially given the fact you haven't seen her in so long. So and then like having like all the calamity that ensues from these two starting to run away with Dustin Hoffman absconding with the bride to be, and then leading to the more somber toned, like it's like them on that bus. They are driving away from the movie part of the movie and heading into reality. It's like a small moment. You know what it is? It's the ending of The Holy Mountain. This isn't This isn't reality. This is just a movie. Now you have to go out there and experience reality. That's the ending of this movie.
I can see where you're coming from. I don't agree with you with that ending comparison, but sure.
Don't misuse your don't you sit there and misuse your dislike for one of the greatest films of all time.
I hate you with a passion. I will say we do see Mrs. Robinson in the scene, leading up to this when he goes to their house looking for Elaine, and she's just like standing there in her room.
That's right.
But that to me really doesn't take anything away from the point of you saying like her reactions in that crowd when she's like, oh, it's too late, like a Wicked Witch of the West type, like it's over, like ha ha ha, he lost and he has to witness it all, like doesn't take away anything from that. Like she is a terrible person and it shows in that scene. But man, yeah, what a tremendous ending. But yeah,
I love it so much.
Crowd with a cross is fucking great.
Oh my god, it was so perfect. And like the religious metaphor finding person in me wants to sit there and find a reason for it, but I'm not even going to, because it should live as just the wacky incident that it is, because that's just so fucking funny.
Completely agree.
All right, well, give me a final rating and review, and we'll hop on over to talk about some pickles.
I'm gonna throw some quick points at you just because.
Oh yes, sorry about that.
The quote that I connected with the most was when he's, laying in the pool and he's just like, it's comfortable. I'm just here lounging. And his dad goes, "Can you tell me what those 4 years of undergraduate school were for? All that hard work?" And he just goes, "You got me." Oh boy, that just hit hard. That was a nail through the heart. Because that's exactly what it feels like. It's like, why did I just do all that? Why did I spend so much money to go to college? What's the fucking point? Um, I'm sure you can absolutely agree.
Yes, very much so. I'm
Um,
still paying for that question today.
and we will for the rest of our lives. Um,
Please vote.
Later on, when he rushes into their house to tell Elaine what the situation was before her mother had a chance to do that, him basically saying like, "Elaine, I fucked your mom." Um, this boy does not have the tact that I would hope from just a watcher of this film. You would have hoped he just softened that blow just a little bit. But yeah, no, he basically just was like, I fucked your mom. Oh, don't cry. Even though I just fucked your mom like a ton. Um, yeah. And then throughout the movie, Ben drives a Alfa Romeo Spider 1600 Duetto. And it's fucking gorgeous, and it's beautiful. I just love it so much. And yeah, that'll be my closing thought. I love this film. I love Dustin Hoffman's character. I thought it was absolutely perfect. Should have won an Oscar for it. The overall storyline, while it was kind of all over the place, I have almost no complaints about it. I really don't have any complaints about this movie, and it just has that like X Factor feeling of like, this is phenomenal. I won't say it's perfect. I don't know why, but I'll give this a 4.5 out of 5.
I'm right there with you. I feel very similar. I'm also going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. I love this fucking movie. As I said several times, it's one of my favorite movies. I do find the passage of time to be awkward, especially given the fact that part of that not well stated passage of time includes an entire engagement period and wedding planning experience, which I'm sure in the 60s, like the courting period was shorter and the wedding planning was easier, but like they seriously make it seem like it happened in like 2.5 weeks. Like it's crazy. But those are minor. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're anything other than minor. But it's maybe partly combined with the small itsy bitsy gripes and some odd gut feeling that's preventing me from going full bore with the 5. But there I sit. I fucking love this movie. Great movie. Shall we move on over to pickle talk?
Some pickles, yeah.
All right. An American Pickle came out this year, 2020. Came out relatively recently. It was written by Simon Rich and based on the short story by Simon Rich. It was directed by Brandon Trost. It stars Seth Rogen, Sarah Snook, and Molly Evanson. It has no major award nominations, in part because it came out like this month, and trust me, folks, it won't. Does it have an estimated budget? I don't see an estimated budget. Its cumulative worldwide gross, according to IMDb, is $36,000, which I don't even know how you would know that. Because it's
movie like that's doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's one of those things like Netflix always claims they know how much revenue they generate from films and then just issue that number out, but they never say how they got it. And it's always, or they always say like that whether or not a film or show is profitable, but they never reveal the methodology behind determining that. Since streaming is such a behind the scenes kind of information set, like data set, it's just tough to decide. Like there's no tickets bought for this movie, nor will there ever be. It doesn't matter. Anyway, It's about an immigrant worker at a pickle factory accidentally being preserved for 100 years and wakes up in modern day Brooklyn. Um, Corwin, do you want to start, or do you want me to?
I'll start. Yo, dude, this shit's hilarious. He turned himself into a pickle. Um, yeah, now that I got that Rick and Morty joke out of the way, um, you telling me now, like the first time I'm hearing this, that this was based off of a short story makes a whole lot of sense because I feel like this would have been almost better off as a short film rather than an entire feature length film. I really didn't mind the beginning. It had high hopes. The whole concept of being, you know, I guess not frozen, but like preserved in pickle brine for 100 years. Yeah, like I get it. Like with this movie, you just kind of have to accept it and not question it. I think they do a fairly good job in explaining it, where they say,
Oh, they
you know,
do a great job.
he explained all the science, or they explained all the science, but we're not going to tell you what it was because this dumb caveman just doesn't understand it. So you don't have to hear the full story. That makes a lot of sense. Um, but while I'm fine glossing over that, the whole concept of no one in this story whatsoever acknowledging at any point after that initial, occurrence that this man is 123 years old and has been preserved in pickles for 100 years, and at no point through all this confusion and just all the bad shit going on, no one stops to be like, this man grew up in a third world country 100 years ago. Maybe we shouldn't be super hard on him for fucking selling pickles without following modern 2020 New York City health and safety standards. Or, at like they completely throw logic out the window once they get past this, like, hey, just don't worry about the science behind it. They just then roll with it and they're like, all right, don't worry about any logic for the rest of the movie because it just doesn't matter at all. And that just it kind of, well, the story wasn't exactly, a home run to begin with. That's just what ended up really losing me, and it's just been hard to get over that.
Oh man, I have so many opinions about this movie.
I want to hear
And
them all.
unfortunately, almost none of them are good. So I actually, for the first, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes of this film I was fucking enamored by it. I was so here for it because it talked about, um, this Jewish guy coming from Eastern Europe with all of the more strict and of the culture Jewish traditions coming over to an outer borough of New York and trying to make a life for himself. And then when he eventually meets his great grandson, uh, dealing with the differences between how they experience Judaism today, based on one, how the traditions have been passed down to him, and two, the religious, a kind of, I don't want to say culture, but the way religion is consumed in society today. And holy shit, does that speak to me? Like, my great grandparents came from Russia, like, spoke Yiddish, moved to the Bronx, like, the whole fucking nine, and ended up taking out a lot of their more Eastern European and more Jewish traditions to try to integrate better with American society. Like, refused to teach Yiddish to my grandparents because they were afraid of them not being considered American enough. Like, I'm not going to say any of the traditions were too watered down, but like outside of like holidays, we didn't really have any Jewish food, or too much, I should say, Jewish food around the house. Outside of like challah on Fridays and like a lot of fucking hummus. Some of the basic and more cliched ones. So I thought that's where this movie was going. Like, they go to the Jewish cemetery, this little Jewish cemetery by the highway, and like they have a moment about the mourner's cottage, and I'm like, this movie is like made for me specifically. I was so fucking ready for it. It's funny. It's literally speaking to an experience that I feel as though I am having. And then it just goes, and fuck that. And then just wildly transitions to a completely different movie. Like, the first 10 minutes of this film are a fascinating conversation. It's a really, really great series of ideas about how we, not even just specifically Jewish, but like how we pass down traditions, what it means to be an immigrant, like how different generations so far removed but geographically in the same location experienced those towns and dealing with their status as quote unquote Americans at those different points. And this movie says, fuck that. Let's get into the pickle business. And I can't fucking understand why they would make that pivot, because that is such a less interesting movie.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly they dropped the ball here, where this went from an incredibly unique idea that would have been fun to play with, where they immediately touch on some really heavy-handed topics, and over the course of like an hour and a half, it devolves into, oh, these guys both have different beards. Okay, yeah, no, they can't be the same person. And that's like the whole like climactic point of this film, like a boiling point almost. Like, what the fuck? Like, it was just so, like, I don't know the last time I watched a movie that the entirety of it, the direction of enjoyment, I want to say, just like was a perfectly arrow just straight down at like a 45-degree angle. Like, the first 5 minutes of this film are so clearly the best five, and it just gets worse every single minute you watch.
I couldn't believe how much worse it kept getting.
God, like, if you stopped the movie when he gets, 10 minutes out of like the new world and like ended it there, find some way to resolve some conflict there, or set it up like open-ended, cool, you just won an Oscar for best short film. And this is just like a film that's going to be forgotten about by September.
Oh, yeah. I don't think you're wrong for that. It's a shame, especially since it's being marketed so heavily. This is a fucking flop.
Like, every time you turn on HBO Max, it's the image right there. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Seth Rogen, you know.
Oh yeah, same. Huge fan.
Wildly entertaining actor. But boy, this is just not it.
And it's funny looking at my notes because they get progressively more upset with this film. Like, they start off so positive. Like, one of the things I really loved about the beginning is, I'm looking at my notes, so I'm thinking of it, is how authentic they made it feel to a filmmaking style that was of that time. Like, the scene with the Cossacks feels straight out of a D.W. Griffith film. Like, the way they frame and have the Cossacks raid the town straight up feels like a scene out of Birth of a Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
100%.
It's crazy how on the fucking nose it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, straight up. And so, like, you're just sitting there. This is the beginning. It's funny. It's charming. The cinematography is really nice. There's all these great, like that. It seems like it's a well-made film. The plot's moving respectably. The scene where he gets pickled is whatever. You move on from it. The scene where he explains how he got pickled, or the scientist scene, is hilarious. It's Seth Rogen in like an accent, which I also want to give him credit for the accent. I think he actually did a pretty good job. It didn't sound cheesy or overly comedic or anything. It sounded pretty. I'm not going to say authentic because I don't know anyone per se with that accent, but it sounded pretty like true to form for what he was trying to go for. But like him in that accent trying to just being like, the scientists explained what happened and it was good science. Everyone accepted that the science was good.
Mhm.
That
Like,
was
the
fucking
reporter's going
hilarious.
like, "You expect us to believe, like, whatever it is you're gonna tell us? Like, you think we're fucking dumb?" And then they had that voiceover, and it's just like, "Oh, yeah, no, that makes complete sense. We fully accept it." That was great.
Yeah,
That was
it was
really great.
it was perfect because again, like with most time travel movies, the less you explain the time travel, the better off you are. So there, because this is at its essence a time travel movie. But it just goes so off the rails. Like every time I thought, no, they couldn't possibly decide to go with that as the direction for this film. Like him making the pickles is to me where it changed. Because even when he started making the pickles, I was in. I was all for it. Um,
Mhm.
but then he gets too successful, and the grandson, the great grandson version of Seth Rogen was got spiteful and reports him to the health department. How has a major pickle company not picked him up and been like, hey, you're the guy who got pickled,
Yeah,
you're selling pickles, let's have you sell pickles. Like the
right.
fact that he is the guy who got pickled almost never comes up again after the beginning of the movie.
It just
I
goes back to
couldn't.
that whole point of, like, there is after they get away with, that great way to explain the reasoning behind the whole situation, the foundation of all this, they just are giving up on there being any logic whatsoever. Any logic. He's at a criminal trial, and the prosecutors are just like, "Let's drop the case," or whatever. Like, we like this. Let's throw this out. Just immediate, deportation. Just no defense whatsoever.
I will
The
say I
guy
thought that
fucking
was
doesn't
hilarious.
have a beard. The other guy does. That's stupid. All right, boom, immediate deportation. It's like, while sure, I could see that being the case in this America, um, in reality, like, it just doesn't make, like, nothing makes sense in this movie.
Well,
Nothing does.
it's it's like with oh my god. Dude, there's so much. The fact that like with the interns, like he just hired what looked like, I don't know, 15, 20 interns, unpaid interns, and now he has a company. That's not how that works. Like he's just going to get audited by the IRS. Interns would not do that. I understand it's Brooklyn. That's actually
Mhm.
all the more reason interns wouldn't do that because hey, it's fucking Brooklyn. It's
Yeah,
really fucking expensive to live there now. In case anyone hasn't checked in the last 100 years, um,
right.
like that in of itself is bonkers. The fact that he is using he relied on rainwater when any homeless person in the world knows you can just go into like a McDonald's bathroom and get water. Not even saying like that he should do that, because he shouldn't be using rainwater either. It's illegal to collect rainwater, because the water you drink has to go through a proper filtration system.
Mhm.
But like there's so many weird things that happen in this movie where it's like you didn't need that. This whole movie could have been Seth Rogen, younger Seth Rogen, navigating the corporate world with his app idea and his great grandfather Seth Rogen following him around through it and having deep personal and meaningful conversations while walking around Brooklyn, seeing how it's changed, where they uncover and dissect their differences. And that's a much better like how great let me describe to you this movie now. All right. Cut
Mhm.
on Seth Rogen, young and old, both leaving the apartment building, walking down. I don't know, pick a fucking street in Brooklyn. Doesn't matter. I don't know. I don't know if they ever named the street they lived on. With Seth Rogen, plural, younger Seth Rogen. Sorry, older Seth Rogen pointing at buildings, talking about what they were. Younger Seth Rogen talking about what they are now, what those differences are. Oh man, this used to be a factory. Yeah, there's not really much factory. There's not much manufacturing in the United States anymore. Oh, what does everyone do for jobs now? Oh, well, a lot of people do what I do, and they work in technology and they make apps. Technology is a huge part of everyday life. And now, how do you stay in touch with your traditions with so much technology? You don't work with your hands, like you see what I'm saying? Like, this is, they could have made this movie really wacky before sunset, and instead
Right.
decided to make it Pickles Inc. I
And
can't, I still can't believe this is the direction they chose to go with this.
and while I absolutely agree with you that, that mentioning of like making this a before sunset type movie, that would have been phenomenal and I would have loved that. They even could have done it this way. Like you can have him hire 20 interns in the middle of New York City to make pickles out of fucking rainwater. You can do that and play it off as a joke, like, ha ha ha, interns, that's so funny. Like, we all experience this. Like, oh, that's great. Or whatever, other random shit you mentioned, because there is so many. Like, you can play them off well. Nothing was, though.
That's another
Nothing
good
was
point.
executed well here.
Very, very good point. The fucking debate scene that he had with that other random person, which, like, one, how did he get invited to do this? And two, that's not how discourse works in the university settings. Like, that was so weird. It didn't lead anywhere. It didn't make any sense. There was no lead into it that really, again, made any sense. Like, you could have played it off as being some weird, funny comedic moment. And I get it was mostly there to rip on Trump, which it's like, on the one hand, I get, but like on the other hand, it was so shoehorned in, it wasn't even gratifying. You're right. Like, everything that they did, maybe by itself, or maybe even in concert with the other things, could have been done, and they just dropped the ball on all of it. They cleaned up that cemetery in like the first third of the movie. Like you're telling me that this guy made $200,000 in what seems like, I don't know, 2 weeks at absolute most, to tear down that billboard, had his unpaid interns clean up a fucking cemetery by the highway, and then move on to other ventures within the first half of the movie, and I'm supposed to act like that wasn't seemingly the symbolic conclusion that this movie was building towards?
Honestly, I'm just so sick of talking about this movie. I just hate how disappointing it was. It's
Pathetic. Like,
it left so much out there.
the fact that Seth Rogen discovers the meaning of Jewish heritage by being temporarily displaced in Schlupsk and going and sleeping for one night in a temple. That's how he's going to find his sense of tradition. Because, as I've said multiple times on the podcast, Judaism is not so much about the religious part of the religion. It's mostly about tradition and sense of community. That's how you're gonna, one night of being displaced, sleeping in a temple. What if you walked into the one fucking church they had in Schlupsk? Like, my point is that it had nothing to do with the faith. Like, it's just stupid. It's disrespectful, honestly. Like, there's so much that they could have tapped into about the proud history of Jews, especially coming from Eastern Europe into New York, which is like a main line of transit from like the early 1900s to the 1940s. And they were just like, nah, he's going to like be really tired and sleep in a temple one day. Like, this movie had potential out the ass, and at every opportunity to go in the correct direction, they were like, how about more pickles though?
I feel like the first 15 minutes of this film was produced as a pitch. Like, they made the first 15 minutes, self-funded, whatever, put a ton of effort and time and love into making it beautiful and impactful and everything, and funny. There were some really funny parts in that, and I really appreciated every aspect of that first 15 minutes. And that's how they pitched it to studios. And HBO took it. And then Seth Rogen got really high and forgot to make this movie, and then basically filmed this in order on the fly by the seat of his pants, or by the, I honestly don't remember how that idiom goes anymore, but regardless, it just felt like a rushed film product that happened to be shot with Seth Rogen and really good cameras and had HBO behind it. Like, it just felt empty as all hell.
Yeah, I agree. It felt like they had it felt like they had such a comical ratio of budget to script, especially considering the fact this was a short story. it shows because maybe all of these things would make more sense in a vastly reduced medium in terms of length, where you don't have to flesh out so many of the concepts. But like this movie didn't even hit an hour and a half; it's an hour and 28 minutes. And it felt long, and that's not good.
Mm-mm.
All right,
Oof.
yeah, give me a rating and review, and we'll wrap up with next Tuesday's choices.
I don't even really want to review this. Like the first 15 minutes, basically until they walk out of that laboratory after the press conference, is a 4.5 out of 5. Like it really was spectacular, and everything else after that was like a 1, maybe. On potential alone, and that first 15 minutes, I'm gonna give this a 2, which feels high, but I don't want to detract from that first chunk. There were some funny moments here and there. Yeah, it had some nice messaging here and there. In all, it was just so fucking ugh. That 2 is a very, very liberal score for it, but
Yeah,
whatever. I'm sticking with a 2.
yeah, 2 is more generous than I'm going to be. I'm going to give this a 1. Um, and it sucks because it's a movie about not just Judaism, but like my specific brand of Judaism. And it hurts to give it such a low score, but at the same time, they fucked this up. So I'm going to just say it again. They don't bring up the fact that older Seth Rogen was the pickle guy for
What?
the. Yeah, like they
What?
mention it they mention it in passing, I think like once or twice, but like it doesn't get brought up as a plot point at all for the rest of the movie. It's seemingly the main part of the movie, and they don't bring it up at all in a significant way after he leaves the fucking lab. It's ridiculous.
It's infuriating because it like
It
nothing else in the
because it
movie
should
makes
have been
sense,
brought
but
up.
this is like the whole thing.
I know, like there were so many instances where the wacky, crazy shit that was happening literally on the news, like with reporters, would have made more sense if the reporters also said, "Yeah, this guy was the pickle guy, the guy who's lived 100 years in pickle juice, and here he is saying wacky things that weren't so wacky 100 years ago." So now I will caveat it by saying, look, if you have HBO Max, yeah, go ahead and watch it. It's like an hour and 28 minutes. If you like Seth Rogen, if you're even remotely Jewish, give it a watch. It still has that kind of Hamish Jewish thing going on there. If you don't know Yiddish, you ain't gonna get that one. But there's some value in it if you already have the service, but like I wouldn't go out of your way to get HBO Max for this. I wouldn't go out of your way to illegally download this. Because it's just not worth the literal actual bandwidth.
Watch the first 15 minutes, stop when they leave that, and just assume that the rest of the movie is a great story about these two bonding and learning to adjust to society and religion, and just accept that reality.
I want Richard Linklater to remake this movie.
Ooh, yes.
Seriously. So yeah, this is just a 1. It had all the potential, like Corwin said, but the fact that it crushed that potential into the fucking dirt as brutally as it did makes it just that much more painful to watch. So this is a 1. Not sorry. Although Seth Rogen, I still do like you, and I hope you and your writing partner do better. That being said,
pick a movie.
All right, so we're looking again. I'm going to say it now, and I'll probably say it a third time as we wrap up. This is not these next picks we're going to make will not be on next Thursday's podcast. They will be airing next Tuesday, under the show titled "Juicing the Big Screen." That being said, I am going to again go with another movie that is currently on HBO Max. As I have the service, and am still trying to find relatively more modern films that I have not seen. So in that vein, I'm going to go with 2018's The Tale. drama thriller starring Laura Dern. That's The Tale on HBO Max.
I have not seen that movie. I haven't heard of that movie off the top of my head that I can remember, so I'm excited. I am really in the mood to stick with some Dustin Hoffman. I want to jerk him off some more next week. So I'm going to go with All the President's Men.
You know, it's so funny. I was just looking at that movie because it is also on HBO Max.
Really? Oh,
yeah,
that's good.
yeah. And I was considering picking it because, for one, it's a politics movie, and I'm very much so in that mental state right now. And it's also a great fucking movie. I just haven't seen it in a long fucking time. So
Yeah, I've never seen it. So
I think you're gonna like it.
I mean, we watched Frost Nixon last week. We watched the Dustin Hoffman movie this week. So might as well merge the two. You got a little bit of both.
1 + 1 is 2.
It's true.
All right, perfect. All right. So the picks are 2018's The Tale and 1976's All the President's Men. Make sure you watch those movies before Tuesday, or don't. Make sure you go search down and subscribe to Juicing the Big Screen, where Corwin and I will be issuing you some much-needed movie talk every Tuesday for the foreseeable future. All right, if you want to hit us up via Twitter, you can do so at JuicingPod. If you want to hit us up via email, you can do so at juicingthenumbers@gmail.com. And as far as Juicing the Numbers goes, until Monday, y'all have a good one.
Bye.